Today on the Relationship Renovation podcast, we talk about physical intimacy and a way for you and your partner to check in with one another. You bring it up to your partner. You say, hey, I think people struggle to talk about intimacy. Can we start checking in on the Frisky Scale, 0 to 10? It's a way that will help you guys understand each other more deeply. And then you guys can get into like this safe place where you're empathetic to one another, understanding what's going on, and maybe even eventually taking some actions that might get you sort of more aligned. And hopefully have a context to talk about something that a lot of couples struggle to talk about. What's your Frisky level right now?
Right now? Why do you do this on podcasts? Hello, all, and welcome to the Relationship Renovation podcast. I'm Tarah Kerwin.
And my name is EJ Kerwin. And
we've got a good one today.
Yeah, we sort of made a promise.
Well, I feel like all of ours are good, but they're also different.
Yes.
Go ahead.
But we definitely we hit themes, and then we want to stick with it a little bit, because I think people enjoy when we dig a little bit deeper, especially around specific issues. And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about intimacy, and we had an episode called The Intimacy Dilemma, which involved, talking about that there's physical intimacy and that there's emotional intimacy, and that they sort of have different, needs, meanings for different partners. That one partner may really need one a little more than the other.
Which kind of takes us in today's episode, because we're going to talk about when you have differing, we like to call it frisky levels, right? Or kind of those feelings of attraction in your body. Again, we use the term frisky. And what happens when they differ and what can happen between couples is a lot of tension, which we'll get to. And so we really want to offer feedback, tools on how to get through differing levels of friskiness in a way that feels good for both of you, because one is not better than the other. Both people are struggling, and they're both in very different places. And so we wanted to normalize that, talk about it, talk about what we see in our couples counseling practice, in our own relationship, and then offer ways to navigate that together so it does not build up that residual tension that happens in the bedroom for a lot of couples.
A little bit of what we're going to talk about today, also, you could easily sort of apply it on the emotional intimacy side as well. And, when we get to solutions, a lot of times with couples, when they identify like, hey, this is the problem, it's finances, it's intimacy, it's parenting, the initial movement forward that we want to help couples with is like, hey, how do you talk about it?
Right.
How do you create like emotional safety, right? That's our sort of like umbrella that we're trying to create with all couples, that there's emotional safety. Like, I can be who I am, you can be who you are, we're different, and we can talk about it in a way that feels safe.
And a very common theme that we see in the work we've done with couples is, right, intimacy has dwindled. There's no more spark. Maybe they haven't been physically intimate in years, months, but they're not talking about it. They're just blaming each other for it. And it's kind of like the elephant in the room. So now we make up our own stories around it, like, oh, they're not attracted to me anymore. Or, oh, like, I just need to go find something else that makes me feel important because my person can't do that for me anymore. And so again, we want to help you to have that conversation, because not a lot of people talk about it at all.
Like, sort of the first thing that we want to offer is just a really simple tool, right? Is like a way for you to say, hey, we're going to begin talking about our intimacy together.
Yes. And
physical intimacy.
Yes. And also that almost all couples have differing levels of friskiness throughout their relationship. And it doesn't always stay the same. Maybe, in 2000, I had more friskiness. And then 2010, you had higher levels of friskiness. So it changes. But the idea is that usually, globally, one partner has a different level than the other. Sometimes they're on the same page, but that's rare.
And if you're not talking about it, if you don't have some like safe entry point into talking about it, then there's a ton of assumptions that get made. And that's when we get into a lot of problems, is like where I'm feeling something, there's something I'm not communicating to Tarah. I don't know how to talk about it, or I'm being avoidant of talking about it. And so then I start like, I start making things up. I start looking and seeing like, oh, that was her reaction when I touched her knee. And well, that must mean,
Right.
and a lot of times our assumptions just aren't right.
So that kind of goes right into what you were going to say. So one of the first things EJ and I kind of came up with was the Frisky Scale. So it's the idea is to make it like outside of us, right? And that like we get to identify our level of friskiness. It sounds cute. I think so. And the idea is like, let's just say it's a scale of 0 to 10 in our relationship. And 10 is like, let's do this thing together. Or maybe one person's a 10 and the other person's like a 0. Then the person who's a 10 understands and identifies like, oh, that's just not happening, but that's okay. We don't take it personally. I know that's like a little blankety, but.
Well, and I think what really worked for us in offering up the Frisky Scale to each other, and then when we would meet with couples and we get into the sort of the intimacy portion of our program and be like, hey, we have already a check-in where you guys check in emotionally on a daily basis, like, hey, how I'm feeling today. This is something positive about our relationship, of introducing, because we've built some emotional safety. Introducing the Frisky Scale was, we just wanted it to be like something that's like playful and light. And just because the word frisky for us works, like that's just kind of, we found that fun. You can do your little synonyms here. Like what's another word for it?
Another couple had like our amorous scale.
The amorous.
I love that.
Yeah.
But here, I mean, I feel like we used it last night. And here's the funny thing, because like we don't normally check in with our frisky levels. We just, maybe it's the end of the night and bed symbolizes, are we going to get busy tonight? But recognizing like on a daily basis, whether you're at work, whether you're freaking driving to the basketball games, sometimes checking in with yourself helps you be aware of that part of you. Because I know as a mom, like when EJ checked in with me about it last night, I'm like, I have no idea. Like I have not stopped today. I've
been busy all day. I can't get any more busy tonight.
I haven't even thought about it, but it was this reminder, right? So then after he asked me, I was checking in with myself. Was it a low? Absolutely. But it helps remind you that like we are human beings with sexual desire that can really get layered over, and we forget about that part of ourselves. Because Frisky Level isn't about like we're going to do it or not do it. It's about recognizing like what's stirred up in your body right now. Are there hormones that do feel amorous? Are they not? Are you in a numb place? Again, it's just another way of really connecting to all parts of yourself, right? And our whole word for this year is wholeness. So it's another part of us.
Yeah. I'm smiling over here because I'm still like, I think I'm still stuck on get busy. And I'm just thinking like how much that like dates. That has to be, I think that's like an MC Hammer reference or something. It's related to get jiggy with it. But
Stop it.
but I think like what we're trying to embody and talk about here is like, hey, like, is there a way that you and I can bring it up? Because if we're accepting the premise that almost never after the first 6 months that we were together, almost never have we been on the exact same place on the Frisky Scale, right? And so once we enter into this territory where we're navigating, being in two different places, like we have to have an entry point for the conversation. And so what we're offering to the listeners is like, hey, if you're like, if you want to introduce your partner, like, hey, we struggle to talk about intimacy. So can we do this thing where we playfully, and it's not related. Here's a big important step, that when I say, hey, Tarah, is it okay if we check in on the Frisky Scale? I'm not doing it as like, hey, do you want to mess around right now?
Yeah.
really what I'm doing oftentimes when I say like, hey, honey, can we check in on the Frisky scale, is I'm sort of like signaling to Tarah, like, we haven't talked about this in a while.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about it because that's what happened. It
And
wasn't,
it's a soft entry.
yeah. And also like it gives you, because we also talk a lot about when you're talking about difficult things that timing and environmental location are important, right? And so the other night when I brought it up, I was like, hey, can we check in on the Frisky scale? Tarah was like, yeah, but I don't like when you do it when we're going to bed, because then I feel a lot of pressure.
This is good, because that's, before we get into that, so we're trying to identify this way that you can kind of be more playful and have an easier startup with it, Frisky scale. There's boundaries to it. There are safety containers to Frisky scale, because the idea, and you have to set those boundaries, and we only learn that through our own massive mess ups with it. But the boundaries are, if your partner checks in with a number that's less than you, that you can't take that personally, because that's not going to create emotional safety, right? And we know that because one time we were out Christmas shopping.
We were at Home Goods.
Thanks, EJ.
I remember it very clearly.
This reminds me of like the movie, what is it, Old School? Yeah, we're going to go to a little Bed Bath Beyond today, maybe. So we were at Home Goods Christmas shopping. And EJ was like,
where are you on the Frisky scale?
Which we say really quickly, check in at times where you can't even get busy, because it actually makes it lighter and it makes like less stress around it.
Yes.
Like maybe you're in the drive-thru.
There's no way we were going to get busy at Home Goods.
So anyway, I identified like a -5. And that was that was very triggering for EJ. And, and we learned like 0 to 10, if you go to the negative, that might feel very hurtful for the other person. But
yeah, -5 felt bad. Like 0 is hard enough, but when you were like -5, I was like, well, how the hell am I getting out of that hole? Like, good God.
And to me, it was like, I was busy shopping. I'm anxious about Christmas. I'm trying to get everybody on the list. And like the -5 to me was just like a state of overwhelm. It had absolutely nothing to do with you. But again, we learned like a boundary, 0 to 10, right? And a big thing was that I was like, EJ, you can't take that personally. Like, I'm so sorry I said a negative. I could get why you were triggered by that. But like the whole idea around Frisky scales, we're checking in with each other to start to create some kind of avenue towards talking about intimacy and sex. And if you get personally reactive, I'm going to not want to share my scale anymore. And you got better at that. So I know if you're checking in with me, which you're 100% of the time the higher Frisky partner these days, I know I'm going to be lower all of the time, but I feel safe to say it. Yeah. There's still times like when you do it at night, when it's in the bedroom, that feels a little scary to me at times, but we talked about it. And I said, can't we just do this earlier in the day? And also the understanding that, let's just say you're texting me, even though we work in the same place, but we have couples like text each other, hey, level of friskiness. From the front desk to
the back room.
Level of friskiness, right? And let's say you're like at lunch and you're like thinking about it like, ooh, I'm like a 7. That's going to maybe change 2 hours later, 3 hours later. And so the idea is too, like, if I say I'm a 7 at noon and you take that and you're like, oh, that is.
I'm holding on to that for hours. Good God.
Then you can't do that. You have to check in again with me, because things change hourly, minutely.
Yes. I mean, I think like most basic level, what we're trying to do here is like, because even, we're lucky. We're lucky that we have this podcast and we get to come on here, once a week, and we talk about a relationship tool, but then we relate it to us a lot. And I'll tell you, like some of the most bonding moments in some ways around like communication in the last few years has been in the context of our podcast. So we're like super lucky about that. But what we're really offering you guys out there is like, hey, here's a way to sort of like jump into the stream of what we're doing that's helping us in our relationship. And we're giving you a tool that says like, hey, we want to talk about intimacy. Here's a direct way. We have a scale now we're going to start using, because everything that Tarah was just was just saying about like me having to like deal with her saying a -5, and that she learns about my defensiveness, and maybe I learn about my own insecurity, and her saying like, hey, when you bring it up at a certain time, that makes me feel anxious. That's all like information that's useful in our intimate relationship. And so every time you do this, the expectation, it's not like always going to be like rosy. Like it's actually going to produce some maybe uncomfortable moments.
Right.
But if you accept that and you get better at self-regulating in those moments, and then you learn from what happened, then you're working on your intimacy, which is what so many people struggle to do.
And it brings awareness to the other person's struggle, because you have consistently been on the higher Frisky scale.
Since kids.
Since the twins.
Since
in
kids.
a decade.
Yeah.
But what that does is it opens up conversation to like, because do I want that? No, I want to feel like a frisky little Kit Kat like I used to, right? A little kitten, whatever. But it brings conversations like, God, I wonder what it's like for EJ to like consistently hearing me check in with like a 2 or a 3, because the idea too, really quickly with the numbers, is 0 to 5 is like, no, it's like it's not happening. I'm not feeling it. 5 is like,
on the fence.
I could maybe like have a makeout session. Sorry, I know that's dating me too. For me, it's like anything above a 7, like let's go. 7, I hit maybe once a year. I'm working on that. You check in with each other. Like, I wonder what it's like for EJ to consistently be the higher Frisky scale. And if I'm talking to you about that, like, God, it must feel like really frustrating, or help me understand how that feels. Because I know for me, like, I'm always frustrated when you're checking in with like a 10. I'm like, damn, I wish I had like male hormones, testosterone, whatever it is. Like, I get envious.
Well, that's a huge point too, because, and I think it's something that like was lacking in our relationship, and maybe something that doing this consistently has helped with. I didn't feel for a long time that sort of you got or cared about where I was in the frustration level, in the not feeling wanted, in not feeling desirable, all of that. Cause it always felt like sort of like my high friskiness was sort of annoying and causing you suffering, because it made you feel bad about yourself. So it blocked you from feeling any empathy for me. And what I often felt was just like that there was this sort of, and it was even vocalized at certain points, is like, hey, that's your problem. Like deal with it. And I think that people who are on the higher end of the like Frisky scale, that's sort of the message they get is like, look, you need to deal.
Yeah.
You need to deal.
And until we develop tools to have healthy conversations around it, that's exactly the predicament that happens. Like, people are in their own isolated way dealing with this, right? Like, we've talked about this. We have like people that won't even undress like in the same bedroom
because they don't want to get the other person's friskiness up. Yeah.
Yeah. Like and so we've been there, we've done that. It didn't feel good. We would argue over it. I would even be scared to have a date night. Like, the idea of date night, that means like it has to end in sex. And but now we talk about it and it feels really safe. And it's not even about quantity, right? To me, it's all quality, and quality intimacy is all about emotional safety. And if you can get through this in a really healthy way, it will come, right?
Well, yeah.
Sorry, it will come.
It will come.
I'm so dirty.
I also had to learn a lot about being, I got like, that it was hard for you to be low, and I continue to get that it's hard for you to be low on the Frisky scale. But there was always like a little bit of a block of really like being totally empathetic to it. And I think a lot of people who are high on the Frisky scale, they lose their empathy, they don't know like what the other person is feeling, and they get like kind of judgmental around, well, why can't you just do something, or if you really love me, or if you say you're attracted to me but you don't. And I had to get it on a much deeper level, that there's a lot going on there, that there's there's the burnout of just like life, and there was some past stuff, but it's through us talking about it that I think we got more empathetic and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we talk about this in a few of our podcasts, where you start layering tools, or you start layering different levels of awareness. And the other thing that came into it for me was the whole acceptance versus resignation. And we've had podcasts about this, acceptance being like, this is what it is right now. I may not like it, but we're working on it and it may get better, versus resignation being like, this is just what it is. There's nothing I can do, to hell with this.
It'll be like this forever.
And I've just really like gripped deeply into acceptance. This is what it is right now. And the mental game for me a lot of times is like, there are many different aspects of our relationship that I am totally enriched by. Mm-hmm. I would never give up our entire relationship because this one aspect of our relationship maybe isn't what I would hope it to be. And so I focus a lot on like on just the other things that are really like wonderful about being with you.
And just to parallel that process, it's the same for me. Like, oh, this sucks to like not feel sexual desire in my body, right? It's awful to feel numb, to not want to pounce like I used to. And I'm accepting that, this is what's happening. And I also know for me, when, we go to Maine for the summer, my husband directs a camp, a boys camp. And like, you go to Maine and there's no work. Well, maybe one day a week. You don't have to do laundry. There's no cooking. The kids are out doing all of their camp things. Like, that is when my friskiness soars. I'm like, because I don't have homework and meals. And there's just like so much that's taken off my plate. So I'm recognizing like, I can't tap into it in the way I wish I could, because I don't have space to even barely, that's what it feels like to breathe. But like, I have this like little hope, like, June's almost here.
There, yeah.
And it's going to be so fun. And we're going to have so much fun in our little cabin at night, playing our cards and connecting, because there is a significant difference in my brain from when I am on all day for like 15 hours a day to when, I'm getting laundry that's folded delivered to my door. Thank you. Just that little piece of it helps me have more space for my own intimate desire, I guess.
Well, and hopefully that's the beginning of understanding that you out there begin to have, is you begin to learn, like, and Tarah would tell me stuff like, I just don't have the space for that. Like, I'm so overwhelmed with other aspects of our life that, like, being physically intimate, just there's like no room for it. And so she'd tell me it, but I wouldn't totally like, but I work all day and I'm busy and I'm doing this, but like, whatever, that's me. Mm-hmm. But then she would, because we're talking about it, and then I actually see, like, when we go back to Maine for the summer and I'm, running that camp, I see her frisky level rise for a period of time. And then what I learned just recently in the last year or two is then in the weeks before we come back home, life back home starts to creep in and she starts thinking about it more. And I see her friskiness level begin to go back down before we've even left. But at least now, because she's talked to me about it and we've connected about it, and then I see what she's talking about it, then we have the ability to be a lot more empathetic, and hopefully maybe also create some ways that help us balance.
We're not good at that yet. I'm just right here. I'm going to be very honest. We are not good about making time for date night, but we have to be, because, and I even said to EJ, like, our anniversary is coming up. Let's like have a staycation somewhere. But again, how many couples listening, or even individuals, when you're on vacation, it feels we've had so many couples like when we're on vacation, we have great sex.
Or even just get along. People say like, we get along so great on
because
vacation.
So many things are like out of your environment and they're not, you're not stimulated by all this stuff. And to me, it's about stimulation. When I'm in Maine, I'm out in nature. I'm in this amazing weather. I'm chilling. It's like the best thing ever. My little nervous system, the only stimulation I've got going is watching my husband play rest hour volleyball, which is super sexy. And that feels really good, but that is not our normal. And so we are still working on finding ways to have better balance, but we also own that we have 2 businesses, a thriving couples counseling practice, 4 children, and 4 animals that one of them acts like a child. So it's almost like having 5 children. He's
we have
very
a neurotic dog.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So, but again, just saying how many couples out there can resonate with, when we go on vacation, it feels so much better. And then the thing is, we get back to life and look at here we are again. So those couples think they're uniquely broken. Guess what? That's not the case. It's all about nervous system stimulation. Well, for me anyway.
All right. So let's sort of just bring it all back to center. What we're offering you is like, hey, let's find a light way where we can originate this conversation. We're saying like, hey, there's a door that we are creating together that one of us has the ability to say, can we talk about our intimacy? But we're doing it in a light way. We're going to say, hey, can we check in on the Frisky scale?
And these are the boundaries around it. This is what's important.
And you'll discover the boundaries as you do it more and more. You might not know them right away. So if you're listening, you bring it up to your partner. You say, hey, I think people struggle to talk about intimacy. I heard this is a great way. Can we start checking in on the intimacy on the Frisky scale? 0 to 10. 10, I'm on fire. 0, I'm ice cold.
I like that.
And then setting up also the idea that this is a work in progress and we're going to get better and better at it the more we do it.
And it's going to be very helpful at an individual level of staying connected to that part of you that you might lose because of stress or life itself.
Well, you're going to learn whatever the obstacles are. You're going to, the person who's lower on the scale, because they're checking in, they're hopefully going to be able to communicate more and more why they think they might be on the lower part of the scale. They might not even know it. And they'll come to understand themselves better. They'll communicate it to you. Person who's on the higher end of the scale begins to talk more and more about what it's like to be on that top side of the scale and maybe not to get to sort of like have that connection with their partner. And then you guys can get into like this safe place where you're empathetic to one another and understanding what's going on and maybe even eventually taking some actions that might get you sort of more aligned.
And I feel like, just to emphasize this is suitable for couples who struggle with intimacy, who want to have better intimacy. And it's a way for you to navigate this in a safe way starting out. So if you're in like a real toxic relationship and there's just a lot of things to unravel, I wouldn't recommend this. I would recommend this for couples who are struggling with intimacy. But at the end of the day, they both want to have a healthy, intimate relationship.
As always, we also just want to thank you all for being a part of our community, this community that's dedicated to relationship wellness, to becoming our best selves together. Super useful. Please give us a like. Please, review our show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. It means a lot to get your feedback. It helps us get the word out. And at the bottom line, share us, please. Just tell somebody who you think would really enjoy our show, who you think that their relationship would get something out of it. Please share it. It means a lot.
And wherever you're listening or watching right now, whether it's with yourself or just with your partner, whatever, you could be in the car, check in with your Frisky level right now.
Yeah.
Give it a try.
What's your Frisky level right now?
Right now? Why do you do this on podcasts?
Oh, come on.
Right now, I would say a 3.
A 3.
Okay.
Right.
So
You don't want to know my that actually is an interesting dynamic. Oftentimes I'll ask you and then you won't ask me.
Well, because
how about my frisky level?
Because I was about to say my ending and I got all distracted. What is your frisky level?
My frisky level right now is I'm feeling kind of playful. I'll go a 6.
Okay. Love it. Okay.
Yeah.
So that means it's not happening because I'm a 3, he's a 6, but that's all
But it's not
good.
related to whether it's happening
and
or
we're
not.
in a podcast room with our Kelby. So it's all good. We won't suck on Kelby to that. So as always, thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. You deserve awesomeness. Bye-bye.
Bye.